Oh, greetings, folks. Right then. So I aim to go through the things in the video title. So then, TI. You'll see a lot of definitions out there that confuse TI with reason. They make it identical with reason. So in logic, so they might define it as, you'll have some people out there that will define some that will be inconsistent, which is rather ironic when they describe TI as objective, and then they'll say that FI is subjective. So, okay, so how does introversion come in here? The reason why they will erroneously think that TI is objective is because they've looked at philosophy and they've looked at certain kinds of a priori logic as objective because it doesn't need to be tested. It's like that is not the same as introverted thinking. What it is with introverted thinking is that it's speculative. Greetings, Ash. It's speculative, and it relies on that reason to sort of verify it. So, for example, TI-X resembler, any TX resembler, they'll start with a notion and then reason it through. And it's through the reasoning of it out that it sort of, to their mind, authenticates it. So they're using, it's in accordance with reason, but it's not the same as reason. Anyone can use reason. It's just that TI ego types, especially NTPs, are more likely to rely on reason because they're not really going off facts. So, but it is not the same as reason. Because if you are to say, if you define TI as objective formal logic, well, basically you're saying that as a type, the INTP or ISTP can never be wrong if their reasoning is logical. But that's not the case. You see, the thing is, there's a difference between a valid argument and a sound argument. So you could describe a situation where you have two factors involved and you have an argument which is logical and valid for those two factors. But what happens if there's a third factor involved? Or what happens if you have another factor which emerges because of those two factors? That it's an emergent property. So then we start getting away from TI. So Carl Jung's definition of TI is exactly right. And I've done some videos on this because it's right in the sense that the INTP resemblers really relate to it. And there's a good definition of it in this book. And I will show it up to the camera. So, I hope there's TI. There's some little bits in this book. This will help to sell the book. Hopefully I won't get done for copyright infringement. So, here's a bit. Hopefully this should be viewable. They use a cyclical zero-in thought process. They go through successive cycles of thinking about something, and with the thinking becoming more and more refined with each cycle. They must categorize people. The logic is objective, but the framework within which it works is very subjective. Thus, their decision-making process is one of subjective thinker. Right. So it's like it's objective in that 2 + 2 = 4, and we don't need to check that. Or certain things in Austrian school economics are a priori super duper. In that you don't need to test that if you double the money supply, then the purchasing power will be reduced. You know, you've only got a certain amount of stuff which is purchasable, and if you double the money supply, you have to reduce the purchasing power. That doesn't need to be tested. So this is the kind of TI which is, I call it the super duper TI. A lot of the time, it's just speculative thinking. I'm giving you that now. It doesn't mean I'm right. A lot of it is based on premises, and those premises are theories about things, but it's not. It might not be all the factors involved. Right. So what we've got here: key features of TI. Builds a subjective internal framework to structure and guides its analysis, and that's one of the reasons. And then we start thinking about, why do some people define TI as structural logic, such as Victor Galanko? Well, that might not be a feature of TI. That might be a feature. That might be a property of the whole type pattern of the TI and X as a whole, and any TX, where it's almost as if the notion is taken, and then the model is taken. It's like reason is then used. A separate process from introverted thinking and extroverted thinking is then used, create a structure to then almost see if that is valid. And there's also a thing coming like we like it, but it's not the same as TI. I mean, do STPs use TI in the same way? No. Well, they will read a situation and do their own thinking, utilitarian, do their own thinking and apply what they need to do. Now, these days, because the ISTP has been reconfigured to where, because now it's a situation where computers are not just for NTs, they're for everybody to get stuff done. And so it's a tool, and so you get a lot of ISTP resemblers in computer. Here we go. This is huge. What's going on? Uses categories that are created by and are unique to the individual. Right. Uses principles that contain logical relationships. Unlike values, they can be debated and often defended logically and revised as necessary. Depends upon principles as the foundation for analytical decision making, in the same way that beliefs are the foundation for value-based decision making. Now, there is one of the things that, one of the nuances of Jung, is he separated, not only did he separate TI and TE from reason, he also had a separate dichotomy of abstract and concrete. So you can have abstract thinking. You can have, and here's an example. When he talks about abstract sensing, you're probably thinking, what is abstract sensing? And he wrote about abstract thinking being aesthetics. So it's like, yeah, abstract feeling, I think, being beliefs. I think I've written down there. Yes. Abstracted feeling becomes a belief. The NLP view, and again, NLP created by two STPs, the STP Bandler, ISTP resembling Grinder. Linguistics professor, and he was in the Green Berets. Right. Beliefs are generalizations built around values. Those values could be justice, fairness, merit. And you build a generalization around those values. Now, this is a slight digression, but you've got TI here, but you've got TI working with NE. So the STPs are more likely to be situation specific, because Dario's definition of SE, immersing yourself in the present context, is very consistent with an artisan chapter written by David West Kersey, because you've got, it's like the whole thing has been distilled down into moments. And something I've sort of come up with, something I've realized this year, not come up with, but realized, that if you are immersed in the present context and you don't have any baggage and you've got a clear mind, then any impulse you have in that context should be appropriate. And this can explain why SE max types, the SPs, can make decisions quicker than thoughts that are appropriate. And also experience is going to be a big factor. So you can actually see it in terms of one of the things, so that it's looking at, say, the STPs, they definitely think for themselves. So that's where the subjective factor comes in. Hi, Laurie, you can join if you want. Let's invite some people. Right then. Right. Let's just go down the list. Right. Right, let's see who turns up. Blimey. Right. She's already. Right. That's a lot of people. Right then. Right. So that's a few people. What was I saying about ISTP? Oh yeah, so somebody told me, and we're going to do this hangout in future. This is interesting. So it's this. I love this thing from Carl about the subjective factor. So you can have, it can start with a fact, but it's where the subjective factor comes in. So Sherlock Holmes, there's a scene from a friend of mine believes that, and she's read the Sherlock Holmes novels, that Sherlock Holmes most resembles ISTP. Jonathan Campbell believes some kind of NT, maybe INTP. And we're having a discussion about this in future. But I can give you an example. He looks out of his window. Watson says, "Oh, attractive, very attractive." And Sherlock Holmes, he notices she's getting out of this posh car. It's not that warm. She's not wearing gloves. This is one of the films. They moved it to the 1940s for budget reasons. So the Green Woman, Basil Rathbone, the best Sherlock Holmes. Well, he made the partisan. Robert Downey Jr. is a heck of a good thespian. But anyway, so he sees a woman coming out of a car. So you got the fit. She's not wearing gloves, and her handbag doesn't match her outfit. Those are the facts. And you got how would a TE valuer would look at those facts, wouldn't speculate as much, because their thought process might be, yes, but if you go down that route, you might exclude other things, and you need to keep an open mind. It's an ironic statement it's an odd statement from a TJ, but you know. So if you watch a police series such as Homicide: Life on the Street, and they'll sit and talk to a witness, and they'll say just the facts, Mo. Now Sherlock Holmes, when he sees those facts, he then starts thinking, oh, she's a woman who's well dressed, getting out of a car. A woman like her would have a handbag match her outfit. So why is she carrying a handbag that doesn't match her outfit? And it's quite a large handbag. So he's then thinking, oh, she must have bought it for size rather than fashion. Now it's slightly undercut when the actual thing that she takes out of the handbag later on is not that big. And he will surmise things like this when the fact, oh, she must have been in a rush. She's not got a coat on. She's not got her gloves on. So arguably you could tell that from body language. You might be able to see that she's concerned. But he's starting with the objective data. He's then speculating. And it's in the speculation that's the subjective factor. according to Jung. And so let's look at a different situation with, say you've got some FE DOMs looking at a similar situation. They might say, they're looking at the same situation, they might pick up, FE DOM might pick up on the body language, the emotions, those kind of things. The FI DOM is, again, the subjective factor is going to come in, and they might speculate as to what's going on. But this is where we get a little bit of an issue, though, with Jung's analysis, is that it'd be interesting to ask an ISFP resembler what they think is going on versus an INFP resembler, because the INFP resembler is more likely to take the pattern of data and extract something from it with the NE. So you got a nice little situation there. So even if it starts with objective data, the subjective factor comes in. What have I got here? So overall, I would say that TI is correlated with reason, but it's not reason in itself. That's because TI relies on reason. I mean, TE, you can go more with the data. You don't have to think as much, analyze as much, interpret it as much. So what have I got here? Relies on reason. Not all the factors. Some factors might be emergence. I relied on that. Mentioned that before. I mentioned the abstraction. I can't remember what he wrote about abstract intuition. It could be, maybe an INTP could like have a thing and then abstract it into a theory. Wait a minute, let's have it. Yeah, Jung wrote in the TI section, he wrote about sort of a primordial image. By that event, the idea. Oh no, wait a minute. The primordial image. Okay. So the primordial image is like the archetype, and there are some things where Jung believes there are certain ideas which are within the unconscious, and then there are those that the person comes up with them themselves. And so in his definition of TI, you can see it leans heavily towards INTP, and that you've got the TI with the NI, and it's almost as if the idea pops into the mind and reason works on it, and then TI. But the actual combination of reason and TI is not synonymous. So it's almost as if you go look at when the people give these definitions of TI and they talk about it's objective and it's logical, it's like you are not describing the right thing. You are describing logic, you are describing reason, but you are not describing TI. Because, and somebody, a female INTP resembler framed this brilliantly when she said, just look at the discussion between two INTPs. They have different points of view. So you can't say that the TI is objective. Not in itself. I mean, they can do a priori thinking, but there's not that much that is a priori that reaches the status of super duper TI. What have we got? Oh yes, here's the thing. So I did those videos on. One of the things I have to say is the way Carl Jung uses the word objective is a little bit confusing to people. People either think it means unemotional, or they think it means objective as in defined in philosophy. So the 18th century point of view of objective is that my super duper TI is objective. And these people who are looking at things empirically, that is subjective because it depends on what you're looking at. So for example, all swans are white. You could say, well, that was a subjective thing because these are the ones that we've seen. And that is what you can see with your sense organs is not objectively true. So they believed that they could get to the objective truth through reason. Jung wrote in his definitions right at the start that he is the way he is using these words is not necessarily the same as everybody else. And that's an example of introverted thinking. He's changing the meaning of things for his own subjective basis of what these things mean. That's very TI. I'm using these words and I mean them to mean this. And so he meant it is as in the actual object. What he should have used was the word empirical. So, and then you got empirical versus subjective. And I'll go through all four for the empirical. Right, empirical thinker. This is very much like the scientific method. But it's not just the scientific method. It's a thinking with a purpose to implement. Either you can say NTJs to implement long-term goals, with STJs, either with supervision, inspecting, a little bit of predisposition towards business there with the guardians, because the functions are not used in isolation. I'll talk a little bit about that. Just a little bit from Behrens. Then I'll go back to the reason I'm mentioning this is she wrote a good bit on the effect of temperament on function use. Right, I think I can show this. This isn't too much of a breach of confidence. Dario sent me this PDF and put my name and email on the top of each page so I don't spread it on. Right, so I will show this. Temperament and the MBTI code. Wait, show. Oh, that's not right. Right, is that cleaned up? It's not very clear, is it? I have a cunning plan. Let's put Spitok in front of the camera and see if it... Because usually when it's brighter, it will... Come on. It's not doing it. Anyhow, Tamara, you can join. Right, so here we go. It's just readable. Can you read that? Artisans can meet their needs for impact and freedom best through the process of extroverted sensor. Take tactical actions and seize opportunities. Right, guardians can meet their needs for membership and responsibility best through the process of introverted sensor. Right, rationals. Rationals meet their needs for knowledge and competence best through the mental process of intuitive and thinking. So motivation is a factor. Here we go. Idealists meet their needs for meaning and identity. I'm looking at you, Tamara. Through the mental processes of intuiting and feeling. Both feeling judgment processes give them ways to act that are congruent with higher purposes in life, one's own and others. Temperament and MBTI code. Here we go. Given the organizing principles of the temperament patterns of needs, values, and talents, we like to use the following explanation to link Jung's theory with the four temperaments. The 8 cognitive processes described by Jung are used to meet the needs and promote the values of the temperament pattern. There we go, super duper. Right, that's not focusing very well, but there we go. Right, and I'll put that back. Yes, so I did thinking. Empirical thinking, and it has a purpose behind it. Hi, K Wolf. So it's about so frequently you will get some people who get confused between. Is this the right one? That's not the right one. This is the right bookmark. Who get confused between extroverted sensing and extroverted thinking. Because extroverted thinking is looking at the data and extroverted sensing is looking at the data, but it's the purpose behind the extroverted thinking in which it wishes to do something with that data. Now, Carl Jung was a little bit cheeky about TE, in which he said that usually the thinking with extroverted thinking is basically a queller of the fact, and is basically that which is like is just implied by it, obviously, because he loved his TI. So we can see how it's empirical, it's about application. Think of the filter of the NTJs use with their thinker. It's goal-based, outcome-based towards application. So that's empirical. TI, subjective. But in accordance with the laws of reason. So, and this is where, and so your intelligence level will come in with not a feature of TI, but with the laws of reason. So maybe when you compare some INTP resemblers with other INTP resemblers. So, but because TI uses the laws of reason a lot, and because they tend to practice reason a lot as a part of TI, as a feature of TI, it tends to use reason, then they're going to get more practice at it. And so usually INTP resemblers, they're going to be quite good at the logical questions in IQ tests, just because they've got practice with the process. Right. What have we got here? I would also say you got to have a definition of TI which lines up with philosophy so that philosophers will not laugh at you. You cannot talk about it being super duper unimpeachable and objective when that was the 18th century, that was the rationalist philosophers. You know, Critique of Pure Reason has been written. Proper philosophers know the limits of reason. Right, so we did the TE. FE, empirical. Paul Ekman, anthropologist. He went to various tribes that had not been in contact with anybody else on the planet. They had the same facial expressions for emotions as everybody else. And he distinguished the facial action coding system from a culturally specific gesture. So you can see that that is empirical. Empirical. So what else is part of extroverted feeling? Manners. It's empirical. It's there. These are the customs, the mores as well. That's empirical. Or the FI stuff. That's subjective. And you can see it with ENTP and ESTP. But they don't do the FI thing, where it's like, they can read emotions very well, they can read the body language, they've got the maybe the knowledge of the morals. You had this in Seinfeld, where a frequent theme was they didn't know what the right things to do was, and so they went by what the morals were, what were the manners. Like, so it's like a comedy of manners, and it's like they didn't have that gut feeling of the right thing to do. Again, subjective factor. Sensing is a little bit tricky. We can see how extroverted sensing is empirical. The introverted sensing, and you can also notice that with the introverted functions being subjective, it's very hard to get at it, especially with the introverted sensor. It's very hard to see that directly. So Carl Jung's version of introverted sensor. Now, when he writes about, I've recently read the SI-DOM profile again. It wasn't a full analysis, it was just a quick read through, but enough to see that. So he writes about the SI-DOM. He's blatant with the bit about the inferior NE being essentially negative, and so if it sees a possibility, it sees negative possibilities. Lines up beautifully with the SI DOMs in Kersey. What's that going to be? Inspector and Protector being risk avoidance, and the Guardians. And you could say that that's low NE. Right. All right. Somebody just put a comment on my YouTube channel on a Twilight Zone video. A lot of typology in those videos, by the way. You know, I suggest they be watched. Jeff is gold in those videos. We talk about sensing types a lot because they're the most of the characters. Right, so SI. So you got this he also talks about that if, and this is a little bit of my interpretation of it, but if, say you're on a roller coaster and you got all these sensations coming at you, it's very much like the empirical sense. It's like you're not really got enough time for the person to relax and then to do the subjective thing of, what does this remind me of? All of the associative things. So Jung sort of hinted at that, and it would be consistent with what we observe. SJs are like a nice, calm, especially the introverted ones, are like a nice, calm environment. And the environment affects their mood. Like if you put some wallpaper up that they don't like, that's going to affect their mood. The SE DOMs are not going to care. And so you can then get an idea of they like, because you'll have this thing where you hear at first in Socionica, oh, the SJs, well, the SI max types are dynamic. The SE max types, the artisans, or SE max types, are static, and go, not in the behavior there ain't, but internally, what do the SPs get? They get bored. They want the external stimulation. Right, that's what we know. That's what we observe. What do we know about Guardians? They like their comfort zone, and they like stuff to be the same, and they have anxiety. Right, so let's correlate anxiety with internally dynamic and that internal mood being affected by the things, the environment around them. So we can say internally dynamic, externally static as a compensation. That lines up with what Jung wrote about. It's almost as if it doesn't want the objective stimulus to be too strong because it wants the subjective factor to come in. So it's like you'll see a scarf and it's like, what does that scarf remind you of? Something Pat Patterson wrote in one of his songwriting books was about sensory-based lyrics, and where my words filled with your stuff, your experience being put in, that's part of the subjective factor. Jung noticed it with art, but I think that's more, it's arguable because it's got to fit in with the temperament. See, that's my TI way, but it's got to be logical in order to prove it's correct, because I've not really got anything else. Hi Farah, hi Camilla, hi Tamsi. When I invited these people, I thought they would appear in the event. So the sensing, there's a subjective factor. What else do SJs like? I get the impression that they love reading sensory description in novels. So they love all of that over description in the Song of Ice and Fire novels. They can easily imagine, if someone says what a smell is in a novel, they can instantly imagine that smell. Very hard for me to do that. I have to concentrate hard to imagine smells. They can do it. So they have this rich imagination on a sensory level of things that they have experienced before. That is part. So you can see another part of the subjectivity, which is consistent with what we hear about. Guardians have a past focus. Well, that's not now. That's in the past. Memories are subjective. You know, and we get this with eyewitness statements, like from police reports that looked at, and actually it was in this book, this wonderful book for NTPs. a guy, almost everything there is to know, Tim Hunkin, INTP Resembler, did this for 14 years before the internet, looking for stuff to write about, funny cartoons, and he wrote about the police reports. What did he do on stuff about obesity? And then he put a... Where did he put it in obesity? That's it. He's got that diagram in there. Oh. I don't think he would have put it under F for fatties. He would have done it for obesity. What we got here? PVC. Where is it? It's just a funny diagram. Oh, there we go. It's right. Just the humour in the book. Because he did Secret Life of Machines. Why did I bring him up? Because he mentioned about the police reports and saying that the certain number of days after the events that people's recollections were different. They saw different things. Again, subjectivity. Here's another example. Classic example of the subjective factor. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There you go. There's a subjective factor. With beauty, there's the objective factor. Yeah, she's really good looking. Then this other person, they're not my type. Subjective factor, subjective objective. What's the other one? Oh, now it's the hardest one. Intuition. Subjective intuition. Jung saw NI as it's an intuition into the internal state. So intuitions as to the psyche itself. And frequently this comes about as a sense of knowing, and they can't explain it, and an idea of something's going to happen. Now, the mechanism that Carl Jung had for introverted intuition was being in touch with the archetypes, and the archetypes being representations of sort of laws that govern the course of human things. So it's like, and it's things that are passed down. Oh, and I'm going to say something about introversion, extroversion as well. There's an interview out there. There's a new video out there. A new Carl Jung interview that is 3 hours long. It just like someone's put together different interviews. I wondered if it was looped, but no, it's a 3 hour long interview. And he asked him about introversion and extroversion. I want to talk about that in a moment. So the archetypes represent universals. It's the idea being that the introverted intuitive is in touch with the archetypes, and the archetypes are almost like the universal laws of how things are going to go. And so if you're in touch with that, then that's the mechanism of how they know the thing's going to happen. Well, how do they know? Well, they're in touch with these universals that are in the collective unconscious. Also, it's this thing of the empirical functions, the extroverted functions are more falsifiable, I would think. You can say, yeah, it's more falsifiable. It's very difficult to falsify somebody's FI, but it is easier to falsify the FE. I would say, no, you've misread that emotion. Look at it this, and I can bring in this expert or these other people. Or it's like, no, Amelia Clark cannot act very well in terms of her face. Her eyes are terrible. I can empirically prove that Lena Headey is a better actress than Amelia Clark, and Kay will back me up on that one. I can empirically prove that what's he called? Him that plays Jon Snow is not the best. Right. I could like get all the evidence out, ask all the casting directors who's better. But there we go. With FI, you can't really say you're wrong to feel that. Right. Now here's the thing in the system. So far is this TI system. So how is extroverted intuition empirical? Well, it's usually a connection between things, and those things usually exist. And also you can falsify it, or you can challenge it. So for example, someone can say, But in these ways, Trump isn't like Hitler, if you've made that comparison. Because transcontextual thinking and seems to be part of any. That's what the NPs do. They notice patterns. And somebody else can falsify it and say, no, but this is how A is different from B. And if you say that B is the same as A, you lose all of these features of B just by looking at the commonalities. And that was Grinder's point of view. ISTP, a typed model as any break, doesn't like complex equivalence. He didn't even like translating between languages. Because it's like he wants the specifics of each context. Again, if you just look at the commonalities between context A and context B, you lose some of the specifics. So that's the any break there. What have we got here? Oh, the stuff on systems theory. Interesting stuff. Kurz's temperament theory is based on systems theory. Gregory Bateson, all of that kind of stuff. Emergent properties, those kinds of things. I like Behrens. She had a nice little compromise by causing her function stuff cognitive dynamics. That's what that book's from. That's cognitive dynamics. It's a little bit expensive now. It might be on Amazon. Apparently this book was too complicated for the people on our courses, so she did a simpler one, Cracking the Personality Type Code. That one's building. The other one is, where's the other one? Building Blocks of Personality Type. This is a good book. I've not read it yet though. I just glanced at it. I'm going to talk about introversion and extroversion, the way Jung saw it. He only saw the categories of introverts and extroverts as something that could be applied practically. He didn't think, and he said in this interview, didn't think an introvert and extrovert actually existed. He sort of framed it as there is a tendency either towards the object or towards the subjective factor. And he even mentioned some people who are in the middle. It's not a dichotomy. He described it as an orientation. So it's almost as if he believes in introversion and extroversion, but not in the introverts and the extroverts. And you might think that sounds like a contradiction, but introversion and extroversion is an abstraction. But you actually call people in real life an introvert and extrovert. So it's like he wants to have his nice TI system, but he knows from experience when it comes to people that it's general tendencies and patterns. And again, what is the purpose of Jung's system? The purpose of Jung's system is to help therapists, because there tends to be type pattern related issues. So with the SI DOMs, it might be anxiety. And he even mentioned sort of compulsive behavior. You know, that fits in with the Guardian temperament and the OCD SI DOMs. Anything else? Now, is anyone going to ask any questions in the side? Two people. I will drink some water. I will give you opportunities to ask some questions. What? I'll get this book for systems theory. K. Wolfare is more a CBT person. Right, anyone can ask any questions? Books I recommend. Maybe books you could recommend to others to get people into typology. Okay. There's a book here. Rennie Barron, she does these funny books. What type am I on the 16 types? The Enneagram made easy. Made easy, but not made simple. Not made simplistic. Got this book. Recently edged it. Well, lovely sellotape around the sides. There we go. Scan bits from that. So, anybody going to ask any questions? Right. Upcoming events then. There we go. Upcoming events. Yeah, all my pillbox. It's not political. It's just there for the there for the tablets. Very good. When's the tablet? Is it time for that? I might as well have those other tablets now. A live pill taker. So what's this one here? Wednesday, June 26th. Again, it's another NT's event. Enneagram variants. Jonathan will actually go through and think about, is it possible for an ENTJ resembler to also resemble 6? Is it possible? Because ENTJs take a lot of risks. Is it actually possible? Well, degrees of resemblance are possible. The Enneagram strikes back. The expanded universe. Yeah. E46X versus E64X. Which is basically just, right, just a way to compare, yeah, as you say, core 4 with a secondary 6 or core 6 with a secondary 4. And that was Shannon's idea, he was watching now. Enneagram instincts and creative writer. What we got here? Word usage. We did a little bit of that on the NT. I'd like to do more with that when I got all the ducks lined up with the right people, the right guests. We've done the tactical intellect of artisans, the strategic intellect of rationals. Going to redo the diplomatic intellect of idealists in full, and the logistical intellect of guardians. Hopefully finish off the FINX versus TINX Model G series with Monica and Leon Sao. That's Type Tips, the YouTuber. Get some other FINX resemblers involved. Try and do some more hangouts with Raquel on counseling. Maybe some practical applications of typology. Might be able to get Nick Helbig to join us. She did those graphics, those Enneagram graphics. What else have I got lined up? Wow. 48 minutes of me just chattering away. Cognitive behavioral therapy. What else? Right, so I can give you an example of extroverted intuition. Douglas Adams, this is not original one, so I've done this about 10 times, this example. Douglas Adams, most people who know typology will go, yep, resembles ENTP. So he was writing the first episode of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and he has this cliffhanger where Arthur and Thord are thrown out of a spaceship into the cosmos. No air. And he said, they're going to die within 30 seconds. So the audience is going to think, how are we going to rescue them? And Douglas Adams is thinking, all of the solutions he came up with on how to rescue them were highly improbable. Oh, it's just too improbable. It's too improbable. It's too improbable. I can't come up with a solution that is believable. So that's going on in his mind. Then he just happens to watch, and again, because the ENTPs and the NE-Max types are interested in lots of different things. Just happens to watch a program on judo where the judo instructor says, and this is about throwing somebody, you have to use your opponent's weight against himself. And then Douglas Adams thought, there's something in that concept, using your opponent's weight against himself. And I thought, hang on a minute. So there's something, so it's like, how to use, so he sort of went from how to use the weight of opponent against himself to, and he sort of abstracted that to how to use the weight of the argument against himself. But no, he abstracted that to how to use the weight of the problem against itself. Okay, what is my problem? We're coming up with this solution to this cliffhanger of how to rescue Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent. The problem I have is the improbability. How do I use the improbability against itself? So he created the infinite improbability generator that explains, and because the Heart of Gold ship is run on the infinite improbability generator to do the interstellar travel, then that explains why Ford and Arthur were improbably rescued by Ford's half-cousin and Ford's half-cousin, Zaphod Beeblebrox, and he was there with Trillian, who Arthur failed to get off with at a party. So it's turned the improbability into a feature, turned the negative into a positive. So that's an example of the NE at work. But so you're making connections between things that are objectively there. You could even say with ideas that are objectively there. So that principle, use your opponent's weight against yourself, was objectively there, and you can falsify it. But when you got an NI down going, I just know it's going to happen, I have a feeling. How do you falsify that? Unless they're saying something about something that either happens or it doesn't happen. But once discussed this with Jonathan, where sometimes their insights about what's going to happen could be like the Oracle of Delphi, where they are the Oracle of Delphi but to themselves. So it's like, oh, I told you it would happen, but I didn't know it would happen like that. I think that's pretty much it. Me talking for 53 minutes and nobody asking any questions. Right then. This is turmeric. You see, people who have the curry powder that has turmeric in it have a far lower incidence of Alzheimer's. Right then, let's have this. Let's have what? Oh, it's a little equivalent of a Dosset box. Right then. So that's everything. Now the thing is, these are a little bit small. But if you go to the website, if you type in Jungian almost everything there is to know, his website is on there and it's all bigger and some of it might be in colour. So there you go. Tim Jungian, very INTP-ish. Wonderful series, Secret Life of Machines. Right. Waffle. I could talk about NLP in future. Right then. Right. Like. Heart from Tamsi. Yes, very good. No idea about this video, but it popped up. Yes. Waves. Yes. I should have done this before. Right then. Oh, got more comments here. Here we go. I can't join. Oh, that's a. What are we going to do? A sad face there. Right. I'm busy being emotional. But thank you. Yes, like that. Right. Yes, I just made a big post just now about that. Oh, oh. All right, there we go. Right. What did she make a post about? Oh, some NF stuff. Right then. I've had those pills. I'll tick those boxes. Had that lot. Right. Oh yes. I might be updating the Model G definition soon. Right. Just little things with the wording, with the energy columns. Right then.